The thick, steamy air of Guadalcanal on that August morning in 1942 was charged with an almost palpable dread. Sergeant John Basilone of the United States Marines was hunkered down behind the remnants of a felled palm tree. His Thompson submachine gun held close, a familiar and trusted companion. From across the jungle clearing, he could distinctly hear the sounds of Japanese soldiers speaking. Their voices carried a tone of confidence, almost as if they were mocking the Americans. They had observed the U.S. forces disembarking, wielding their peculiar weaponry. These substantial drum-fed firearms that seemed more appropriate for Chicago gangsters than for the brutal realities of Pacific combat. Initially, the Japanese soldiers had found the Thompson quite amusing. They'd referred to it as the American toy gun. However, within a mere few hours, that amusement would transform into terrified screams. The Thompson submachine gun, officially designated the M1928A1, arrived in the Pacific Theater carrying with it far more than just ammunition. Though its origins traced back to the grim trenches of the First World War, its refinement occurred in the clandestine speakeasies of Prohibition-era America. This firearm had already cultivated a formidable reputation before it ever saw a significant battle. To a vast majority of the world's populace, the Thompson was not considered a military arm at all. Instead, it was recognized as the emblem of Al Capone's criminal enterprises, famously dubbed the Chicago typewriter, the gun that had repeatedly splashed headlines across American newspapers in streams of blood throughout the 1920s and 30s. Yet, as the American military prepared to carry the fight directly to Japan, traversing thousands of miles of the perilous ocean, the strategists formulating their plans were confronted with a stark and sobering reality. The impending conflict would not unfold across the open fields of Europe or the arid expanses of North Africa. This war promised to be a grim, close-quarters struggle. It would be jungle warfare, where visibility was reduced to mere yards, where an enemy could lie concealed behind any given tree, and where conventional rifles, cumbersome in the dense undergrowth, would prove to be little more than unwieldy clubs. The Thompson, despite its notorious criminal associations, offered a distinct advantage that no other American firearm of the time could match. It delivered devastating close-range firepower, all within a package that was light enough for a single soldier to maneuver through the planet's most unforgiving landscapes. The weapon's journey to the Pacific began as an idea in the mind of General John Thalia Thompson, a career Army officer who had personally witnessed the horrors of trench warfare in France. Thompson envisioned what he termed a trench broom, an automatic weapon capable of clearing enemy strongholds with a sweeping motion of a single soldier's arm. His Auto Ordnance Corporation had developed the firearm, but it arrived too late for deployment in the Great War. However, by 1942, Thompson's concept was poised to be tested under conditions he could scarcely have imagined. Meanwhile, the Japanese military had spent a considerable portion of the preceding decade meticulously refining its own approach to Pacific combat. Their soldiers were extensively trained in the intricacies of jungle warfare, demonstrating exceptional skill in camouflage and ambush tactics that had proven brutally effective against Chinese forces and British colonial troops. Japanese officers meticulously examined captured American equipment with the methodical thoroughness that defined their military culture. Upon their initial encounter with the Thompson submachine gun, their assessment was both swift and dismissive. They concluded that the weapon was excessively heavy. Weighing nearly 11 pounds when fully loaded, it would, they believed, impede the movement of American troops in the oppressive heat of the jungle. Its .45 caliber ammunition, while powerful, was also bulky, limiting the number of rounds a soldier could carry for sustained engagements. Most damning in their view, the Thompson's rate of fire was perceived as wasteful, a reflection of American industrial extravagance rather than military efficiency. Japanese doctrine prioritized precision, discipline, and the judicious conservation of ammunition. To them, the Thompson embodied everything they considered flawed in American military thinking. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, one of Japan's most influential military strategists, articulated his views in his tactical assessments, describing American forces as soft and undisciplined, relying on their superior firepower to compensate for inadequate training and a lack of fighting spirit. In his estimation, the Thompson perfectly symbolized this weakness, a weapon designed for indiscriminate spraying by soldiers incapable of accurate shooting. This dismissive attitude, however, was not entirely unfounded. The Thompson did possess significant drawbacks. Japanese intelligence had accurately identified its considerable weight and the bulkiness of its ammunition, compared to the smaller caliber rounds used in most military rifles. The gun's intricate mechanism contributed to its high production cost and presented maintenance challenges in field conditions. Most critically, the Thompson's notorious reputation in civilian hands made many American military leaders hesitant to fully embrace it. General Douglas MacArthur himself initially expressed reservations about arming his troops with what he contemptuously termed gangster guns. The weapon's association with organized crime introduced political sensitivities that reached all the way to Washington. How could America present itself as a champion of freedom and democracy while equipping its soldiers with the same firearms employed by bootleggers and bank robbers? However, for the Marines and soldiers who would actually carry these weapons into the fray, political considerations and public perception held little weight. As American forces prepared for their initial major offensive operations in the Pacific, practical concerns began to supersede philosophical objections. The Thompson might have been heavy, but it was also remarkably reliable. While it consumed ammunition rapidly in the anticipated close-quarters combat of the Pacific, that high rate of fire could prove to be the crucial difference between survival and death. The weapon's .45 ACP cartridge, originally developed for the M1911 pistol, delivered a stopping power that smaller caliber rounds simply could not match. In jungle warfare, where encounters with the enemy might occur at distances measured in feet rather than yards, the Thompson's substantial bullets possessed the ability to penetrate light cover and incapacitate an opponent with a single hit. The psychological impact of the weapon's distinctive sound, a rapid percussive beat that announced the American presence with undeniable authority, would prove to be almost as significant as its physical capabilities. As 1942 began, both sides were bracing for a confrontation that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the Pacific War. The Japanese forces, secure in their tactical superiority and disdainful of American equipment, established defensive strongholds across a series of strategically vital islands. They had thoroughly studied American doctrine, analyzed captured weaponry, and concluded that their disciplined, well-trained troops would effortlessly overcome any technological advantages the Americans might possess. American planners, meanwhile, grappled with the unprecedented reality of waging a war unlike any in their nation's history. The immense distances across the Pacific meant that every single bullet, every weapon, every piece of material would need to be transported thousands of miles from the nearest American manufacturing facility. There would be no opportunity for resupply, no margin for error. Once hostilities commenced, the weapons they had chosen would have to function flawlessly from the very first moment and every subsequent moment. The Thompson submachine gun, despite its inherent flaws and controversial past, represented a calculated gamble. American military leaders were betting that raw firepower could compensate for the tactical disadvantages they anticipated facing in the Pacific. They were wagering that American industrial might, embodied in a weapon capable of discharging 600 rounds per minute, would ultimately prove superior to Japanese training and discipline. The stage was thus set for a confrontation that would rigorously test both prevailing philosophies of warfare. In the sweltering jungles of the Solomon Islands, on the volcanic shores of the Central Pacific, and within the dense forests of the Philippines, the Thompson submachine gun would either vindicate its proponents or tragically confirm the gravest fears of its detractors. The Japanese had initially scoffed at the American toy gun. Soon they would discover that some toys possessed a formidable bite, unleashing a thunderous industrial roar. The first significant trial by fire would occur at a location most Americans had never heard of, a small island in the Solomons known as Guadalcanal. It was here, in August of 1942, that American forces would initiate their inaugural major offensive operation in the Pacific Theater. They would be armed with thousands of Thompson submachine guns, each one a tangible representation of the conviction that American firepower could triumph over Japanese tactical supremacy. The Japanese defenders, supremely confident in their mastery of jungle warfare and dismissive of American capabilities, prepared to impart a harsh lesson in Pacific combat to the invading forces. They had studied the Thompson, meticulously analyzed its perceived weaknesses, and devised tactics specifically engineered to negate its advantages. In their minds, the approaching engagement would serve as irrefutable proof of the superiority of Japanese military doctrine over American industrial prowess. Neither side, however, possessed a complete understanding of the formidable forces they were about to unleash. The clash between Japanese tactical precision and the sheer might of American firepower would irrevocably alter both armies' comprehension of Pacific warfare. The Thompson submachine gun, previously derided as a gangster's implement and mocked as a mere American toy, was on the cusp of etching its name into history with a barrage of bullets that would resonate throughout the Pacific for the remainder of the war. As the initial American landing craft approached the beaches of Guadalcanal, Marines performed final checks on their weaponry. The Thompson's distinctive silhouette was evident throughout the attacking force, its drum magazine and slender barrel clearly marking it as something unique, something quintessentially American. These Marines had undergone training with the weapon, familiarizing themselves with its intricacies and potential, yet none could truly grasp the full implications of what they were carrying into battle. They were about to find out. The jungle ahead lay silent, pregnant with anticipation. Somewhere within that verdant labyrinth, Japanese soldiers were setting their ambushes, assured that their superior tactics would swiftly overwhelm the American invaders. They had encountered the Thompson in intelligence reports, dismissing it as yet another instance of American excess and poor military judgment. The laughter was about to cease. The morning mist clung to the jungle floor of Guadalcanal with an almost sentient presence, muting sounds and distorting shadows. It was the 21st of August, 1942, and Private First Class Mitchell Page of the U.S. Marines was crouched in his foxhole, his Thompson submachine gun held at the ready. Around him, the 1st Battalion of the 7th Marines had dug in, anticipating what they knew would be a protracted and arduous night. Intelligence had indicated an imminent major Japanese counterattack, but nothing could have truly prepared them for the unfolding events. At precisely 01:30 hours, the jungle erupted. The Japanese assault struck with a ferocity that even seasoned Marines found astonishing. Hundreds of soldiers from the Sendai Division surged from the tree line, their war cries piercing the humid air as they charged the American positions with bayonets fixed. This was Banzai warfare in its most terrifying manifestation, a human wave assault designed to overwhelm through sheer audacity and brute force. Yet, the Japanese had committed a critical miscalculation. Their assault plan was predicated on neutralizing American rifle fire, anticipating the standard bolt-action M1 Garand as the primary threat. What they encountered instead was something that their tactical manuals had never adequately accounted for: the concentrated, overwhelming firepower of dozens of Thompson submachine guns unleashing a torrent of fire simultaneously. Private Page later described the sound as akin to the ripping open of the world's largest zipper. The distinctive chatter of Thompson fire filled the night, each weapon expelling its .45 caliber rounds at a rate of 600 per minute. The impact on the charging Japanese forces was immediate and devastating. The 45 ACP rounds, each weighing 230 grains and traveling at 800 feet per second, possessed a stopping power that smaller caliber weapons simply could not replicate. When these massive bullets struck their targets, they did more than wound. They physically propelled the attackers backward, disrupting the momentum of the entire assault. Japanese soldiers, trained to absorb rifle fire and continue their charge, found themselves facing an impenetrable wall of lead that no amount of courage or determination could overcome. Sergeant John Basilone, stationed at a crucial point along the Marine defensive line, became the living embodiment of the Thompson's devastating efficacy. As wave after wave of Japanese soldiers emerged from the jungle's embrace, Basilone operated his Thompson with mechanical precision. The weapon's drum magazine held 50 rounds, and Basilone had honed his skills to the point of changing magazines in absolute darkness, his hands moving by muscle memory forged through countless hours of practice. However, it was not solely the sheer volume of fire that rendered the Thompson so effective. It was also its profound psychological impact. The Japanese had constructed their entire tactical doctrine around the concept of overwhelming enemy positions through superior fighting spirit. Their soldiers were indoctrinated to believe that American forces would falter and retreat when confronted with a determined bayonet charge. The Thompson shattered this deeply ingrained assumption with brutal efficiency. The cacophony of multiple Thompsons firing in unison generated a psychological effect that Japanese commanders had never anticipated. Unlike the measured crack of rifle fire, the Thompson's rapid chatter conveyed an impression of virtually unlimited ammunition and overwhelming firepower. Japanese soldiers, accustomed to counting rifle shots and timing their advances accordingly, found themselves facing what appeared to be continuous fire emanating from every American position. Colonel Konao Ichiki, commanding the Japanese assault force, had specifically orchestrated his attack to exploit what he perceived as American vulnerabilities. His intelligence reports had indeed noted the presence of Thompson submachine guns within Marine units, but Japanese tactical assessments had dismissed these weapons as ineffectual for defensive combat. The Thompson's reputation for inaccuracy at longer ranges had led Japanese planners to conclude that it would be useless in a nocturnal assault where precise aiming was improbable. They were catastrophically mistaken. In the close-quarters engagements that define jungle warfare, accuracy became secondary to volume of fire and stopping power. The Thompson excelled in both domains. Marines found little need for precise aiming when Japanese attackers were charging directly at their positions from distances of 20 yards or less. Their primary objective was simply to saturate the air with bullets, and the Thompson's 45 caliber rounds ensured that any hit would be decisive. The battle raged for 6 grueling hours, with Japanese forces launching repeated assaults against the Marine positions. Each attack followed a remarkably consistent pattern. Japanese soldiers would emerge from the jungle in coordinated waves, only to be met by the devastating torrent of Thompson fire that shattered their momentum and dispersed their formations. The weapon's unwavering reliability proved to be a critical factor as the night wore on. While other firearms faltered, jamming, or overheating, the Thompson continued to function flawlessly, unhindered by the humid conditions or the relentless use. Marine Corporal Anthony Casemento, fighting alongside Basilon's unit, later recalled the surreal nature of the combat. "You couldn't see them coming until they were right on top of you," he remembered. "But when they hit our line, it was like they ran into a buzzsaw. The Thompsons just chewed them up." The Japanese, for their part, struggled immensely to adapt to this unexpected and overwhelming firepower. Their tactical doctrine emphasized individual marksmanship and precise fire control, principles that proved woefully inadequate when confronting weapons designed for sustained automatic fire. Japanese soldiers found themselves pinned down by the continuous Thompson barrage, unable to advance or retreat effectively. As dawn broke over Guadalcanal, the devastating consequences of the Japanese miscalculation became starkly apparent. Hundreds of bodies lay scattered across the jungle floor, a grim testament to the Thompson's annihilating effectiveness in close-quarters combat. The Sendai Division, one of Japan's most elite fighting units, had been virtually annihilated in a single night of fighting, but the impact extended far beyond mere casualty figures. Japanese military commanders monitoring the battle from various positions throughout the Pacific were compelled to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their fundamental assumptions regarding American weaponry and tactics had been profoundly flawed. The Thompson submachine gun, once dismissed as a mere gangster's plaything, had demonstrated an unparalleled ability to halt elite Japanese infantry in their tracks. News of the fighting at Guadalcanal rapidly circulated through Japanese military circles. Intelligence officers who had previously discounted the Thompson began urgently requesting detailed analyses of the weapon's capabilities. Tactical manuals were hastily revised to address the threat posed by American automatic weapons. Most significantly, Japanese commanders began to question their foundational beliefs about American combat prowess. The psychological blow to Japanese forces was equally profound. Soldiers who had been conditioned to believe in their inherent tactical superiority found themselves facing weapons that seemed to symbolize American industrial might. The Thompson's distinctive sound became inextricably linked with American firepower and technological advantage, eroding Japanese confidence in there to surmount superior equipment through sheer spirit alone. For the American forces, the decisive victory at Guadalcanal served as definitive validation for their decision to embrace the Thompson, despite its contentious reputation. Marine commanders who had initially harbored skepticism regarding the weapon's military utility became its most ardent proponents. Reports emanating from the front lines emphatically highlighted the Thompson's reliability, its formidable stopping power, and its palpable psychological effect on enemy combatants. General Alexander Vandergrift, in command of Marine forces on Guadalcanal, dispatched a comprehensive report to Washington, underscoring the Thompson's exceptional performance. "The submachine gun has proven invaluable in jungle fighting," he stated. "Its rapid rate of fire and heavy bullet have stopped enemy attacks that might otherwise have overrun our positions. I recommend immediate expansion of submachine gun distribution to all frontline units." The success at Guadalcanal also initiated a shift in American tactical doctrine. Military planners, who had previously viewed the Thompson as a specialized weapon suited for limited roles, began to perceive it as a standard infantry tool. Its proven effectiveness in the challenging jungle environment suggested that it might prove equally valuable in other close-quarters scenarios, including urban combat, trench warfare, and assault operations. Perhaps most importantly, the fighting at Guadalcanal unequivocally demonstrated that American industrial capacity could produce weapons capable of matching and indeed exceeding anything within the Japanese arsenal. The Thompson represented more than just raw firepower. It was a tangible embodiment of American manufacturing prowess and technological innovation. Each weapon necessitated precision machining and the utilization of high-quality materials, resources that Japan's war-strained economy found increasingly difficult to provide. As word of the Guadalcanal triumph reached the American home front, the Thompson submachine gun began to shed its association with organized crime and emerge as an iconic symbol of American military strength. Hollywood studios, always quick to capitalize on current events, began prominently featuring the weapon in their war films. Magazine articles celebrated the Tommy gun Marines, who had repelled Japanese banzai charges with overwhelming American firepower. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. In less than a year, the Thompson had evolved from a controversial firearm linked to illicit activities to a celebrated instrument of American victory. The very characteristics that had made it so effective in the hands of Prohibition-era criminals, its reliability, its devastating stopping power, and its intimidating presence, proved equally valuable in military applications. Japanese military leaders, meanwhile, struggled mightily to devise effective countermeasures. The Thompson's potency was not derived from any single technological innovation that could be easily replicated or countered. Instead, it represented a fundamentally different philosophy of warfare, one that prioritized overwhelming firepower over individual skill and industrial capacity over tactical finesse. Some Japanese commanders attempted to develop their own submachine guns, but Japan's industrial limitations rendered mass production unfeasible. Efforts to adapt existing strategies to lessen vulnerability to the Thompson's firepower proved exceedingly challenging in the dense jungle environments due to its formidable close-quarters efficacy. As 1942 neared its conclusion, military strategists on both sides began to grasp the full significance of the engagements at Guadalcanal. The Thompson submachine gun had unequivocally demonstrated that American armaments could rival the effectiveness of Japanese tactical approaches. More crucially, it had underscored the capacity of American industrial infrastructure to generate weaponry in volumes that Japan simply could not replicate. The initial amusement had undeniably ceased. In its place, a dawning realization emerged. The conflict in the Pacific would hinge not solely on bravery and strategic acumen, but on the capability to manufacture and deploy superior arms in overwhelming numbers. The Thompson submachine gun, once derided as a mere American plaything, had transformed into an emblem of the grim efficiency inherent in industrial-scale warfare. The arduous fighting in the jungles of Guadalcanal marked merely the prelude to the extensive island-hopping campaign that would sweep American forces across the Pacific. The Thompson would undoubtedly face new trials in unfamiliar territories. Yet, the weapon had already validated its worth where it mattered most, in the hands of American combatants confronting resolute adversaries under the most daunting conceivable circumstances. The Japanese had come to dread the distinct staccato of the Thompson. Soon that sound would reverberate across every significant theater of operations in the Pacific, heralding the presence of American forces with an unmistakable assertion of authority. the firearm that had once symbolized American defiance of the law had become the instrument of American triumph. The coral shores of Tarawa ran red with blood as Marine Sergeant Robert Bob Mard pressed himself against the seawall, the Thompson submachine gun held firmly against his chest. It was November 20th, 1943, and the amphibious landing on this diminutive Pacific atoll had devolved into a harrowing ordeal of unprecedented magnitude. The Japanese had transformed Tarawa into a formidable stronghold, establishing interlocking fields of fire that decimated the beaches of any discernible movement. However, Mard and his fellow Marines had absorbed vital lessons in the months since Guadalcanal. The Thompson was not merely a jungle implement. It was a specialist in urban combat, perfectly suited for the close-quarters engagements characteristic of Japan's fortified islands. The Japanese defenders of Tarawa represented a new phase in Pacific warfare. The suicidal banzai charges, which had exacted such a heavy toll at Guadalcanal, were conspicuously absent. Instead, a defensive posture had been adopted, relying on entrenched positions, overlapping firing zones, and an unwavering resolve to exact a heavy toll of American lives for every inch of coral. Rear Admiral K.G. Shibasaki, commanding the garrison, had boasted that 1,000,000 men could not capture Tarawa in 100 years. He had failed to anticipate the Thompson submachine gun's evolution into an assault weapon. The weapon, proven so effective in jungle ambushes, now faced its ultimate test within the confined confines of Japanese bunkers and pillboxes. These concrete fortifications, engineered to withstand naval bombardments, created a multi-dimensional combat environment where conventional infantry tactics proved insufficient. Standard rifle fire could not breach the thick walls, and grenades often ricocheted harmlessly off reinforced structures. Nevertheless, the Thompson's .45 caliber rounds, discharged at close range, could penetrate the firing slits and ventilation openings that Japanese engineers had been compelled to incorporate into their designs. More significantly, the weapon's rapid rate of fire enabled Marines to suppress enemy positions long enough for assault teams to close the distance and neutralize defenders with explosives. Corporal John Blackjack Bradley, engaged in combat with the 2nd Marine Division, inadvertently discovered the Thompson's bunker-penetrating capabilities. While pinned down by machine gun fire emanating from a concrete emplacement, Bradley observed his Thompson rounds ricocheting inside the bunker through a narrow firing port. He later recounted, "I just kept pouring rounds through that slot. Pretty soon, the firing stopped." This tactic, christened bunker spraying by the Marines, became standard procedure throughout the Central Pacific Campaign. Thompson gunners would identify firing ports or other apertures in Japanese positions and then deliver sustained automatic fire into these vulnerable points. The .45 caliber projectiles, with their substantial stopping power, proved devastatingly effective within the cramped interiors of enemy fortifications. Japanese defenders, accustomed to evading rifle fire by staying clear of firing ports, found themselves defenseless against weapons capable of saturating their bunkers with lethal projectiles. The psychological impact was as profound as the physical devastation. The distinctive sound of Thompson fire, amplified and distorted by concrete walls, produced a terrifying cacophony that eroded the morale of even veteran defenders. Lieutenant Colonel David Shupe, commanding the 2nd Marine Regiment at Tarawa, recognized the Thompson's tactical advancement and began integrating it into formal assault doctrine. He reported to division headquarters, "The submachine gun has become our primary bunker assault weapon. Its ability to deliver sustained fire through small openings makes it invaluable for reducing fortified positions." However, the Thompson's utility at Tarawa extended beyond bunker combat. The weapon proved equally valuable in the close-quarters fighting that defined the struggle for the Betio airfield. Japanese defenders had constructed an intricate network of trenches and spider holes, transforming every advance into a deadly game of hide-and-seek. Conventional infantry tactics, emphasizing fire and movement with rifles, were inadequate for this three-dimensional battlefield. The Thompson's high rate of fire and formidable stopping power rendered it the ideal instrument for clearing these defensive strongholds. Marines could unleash automatic fire into suspected hiding places, compelling defenders to reveal themselves or perish where they lay concealed. The weapon's dependability in Tarawa's sandy, coral dust environment also proved critical. While other firearms experienced jams or malfunctions, the Thompson performed flawlessly. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, though his combat experience in the Pacific would commence later in the war, eloquently captured the essence of the Thompson's psychological effect in his memoirs. He wrote, "The sound of a Thompson firing was like music to our ears. It meant that somewhere Americans were winning. Meanwhile, the Japanese struggled to adapt to this new reality. Their defensive doctrine, predicated on precise fire control and ammunition conservation, proved ineffective against weapons engineered for sustained automatic fire. Japanese soldiers found themselves outmatched in close-quarters engagements, unable to counter the Thompson's rate of fire with their bolt-action rifles and light machine guns. Intelligence reports from Japanese units on Tarawa indicated growing apprehension regarding American automatic weaponry. One Japanese officer wrote, "The enemy possesses numerous rapid-fire guns that make close combat extremely difficult. Our soldiers cannot approach American positions without being subjected to overwhelming fire." Some Japanese commanders attempted to devise countermeasures, including the deployment of their own submachine guns and the modification of defensive positions to minimize exposure to Thompson fire. However, Japan's industrial constraints rendered it impossible to match American production of automatic weapons, and the Thompson's effectiveness in bunker warfare rendered traditional fortification techniques obsolete. As American forces advanced across the Central Pacific, the Thompson continued to evolve and adapt. The weapon that had begun as a trench sweeper in World War I gained notoriety during the Prohibition era in America and proven its mettle in the jungles of Guadalcanal, now became the standard tool for Pacific Island warfare. The Marshall Islands campaign in early 1944 saw further refinement of Thompson tactics. Marines developed specialized assault teams centered around Thompson gunners, supported by riflemen and grenadiers, providing cover for the submachine gun's devastating close-range firepower. These teams demonstrated the capability to neutralize Japanese positions that had previously necessitated substantial artillery barrages or costly frontal assaults. At Kwajalein, the Thompson's effectiveness was so pronounced that Japanese defenders began abandoning their positions at the first intimation of its distinct chatter. American intelligence officers noted a marked decline in Japanese defensive efficacy, attributing it partly to the psychological impact of facing weapons that appeared to embody unlimited firepower. The weapon's success also began to influence American industrial output. The Auto Ordnance Corporation, the Thompson's manufacturer, received substantial orders from the War Department. Factory workers in Bridgeport, Connecticut, many of them women who had assumed the roles vacated by men sent overseas, toiled around the clock to meet demand. The Thompson had transcended its status as a mere weapon. It had become a symbol of American industrial prowess and technological superiority. Perhaps most significantly, the Thompson's success in the Pacific began to fundamentally alter assumptions regarding infantry combat. Military theorists who had long emphasized the importance of individual marksmanship and fire discipline were compelled to confront the reality that overwhelming firepower could prove more advantageous than precise shooting. The Thompson embodied a new combat philosophy, one that would shape weapon design and tactical doctrine for decades to come. By mid-1944, as American forces prepared for the assault on Saipan and the Mariana Islands, the Thompson submachine gun had become an indispensable component of Pacific warfare. Japanese intelligence reports consistently identified American automatic weapons as a primary threat, and defensive planning increasingly focused on countering the Thompson's devastating effectiveness. The weapon that Japanese officers had once dismissed as a gangster's toy now commanded their respect and fear. Intelligence manuals were updated to highlight the peril posed by American submachine guns, and tactical doctrine was revised to minimize exposure to their devastating fire. For American forces, the Thompson had become more than just a tool of war. It was a testament to their technological and industrial supremacy. The distinctive sound of Thompson fire had become synonymous with American victory, a mechanical harbinger announcing the arrival of liberation to occupied territories throughout the Pacific. As the conflict entered its concluding stages, with American forces poised for the ultimate assault on Japan itself, the Thompson submachine gun stood ready to fulfill its role in the war's denouement. The weapon had traversed a remarkable trajectory, from the conceptualization of a World War I general to the lawless streets of Prohibition-era America. From the dense jungles of Guadalcanal to the fortified coral islands of the Central Pacific, the Japanese learned at a terrible price that certain American toys were far from innocuous. The Thompson's .45 caliber pronouncements had been delivered with unmistakable authority across every major theater of the Pacific. Its message was simple yet profound. American industrial might, embodied in superior weaponry and boundless production capacity, would ultimately prove decisive in the struggle for Pacific dominance. The laughter had not merely ceased, it had been supplanted by a grudging admiration for American capabilities that would fundamentally reshape Japanese understanding of modern warfare. The Thompson submachine gun, once mocked as a symbol of American excess and flawed military judgment, had become the voice of American victory in the Pacific. As the sun descended over Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945, representatives of the Japanese Empire stood on the deck of the USS Missouri to sign the instruments that would bring World War II to a close. Among the American forces gathered for this momentous occasion were thousands of Marines and soldiers who had carried Thompson submachine guns across the Pacific, from the Guadalcanal jungles to the beaches of Okinawa. The weapon, which had commenced this journey as a dismissed curiosity, a gangster's firearm deemed irrelevant to modern warfare, had ascended to become one of the most recognizable symbols of American military power. The Thompson's distinctive outline, complete with its drum magazine and finned barrel, had been featured in innumerable photographs and newsreels, becoming as iconic as the American flag itself. Yet, the Thompson's true legacy extended far beyond its symbolic significance. This weapon had fundamentally reshaped the nature of infantry combat, demonstrating that rapid-fire automatic weapons could be decisive in close-quarters engagements. The lessons learned within Pacific bunkers and jungle clearings would inform military doctrine for generations, leading to the development of assault rifles and contemporary infantry tactics that prioritized firepower over individual marksmanship. The Japanese military, forced to confront the stark reality of American industrial supremacy, had absorbed painful lessons regarding the intricate relationship between technology and warfare. The Thompson represented more than just superior firepower. It embodied a different approach to military manufacturing, one that emphasized quantity and reliability over refinement and precision. Japan's inability to match American production of automatic weapons had been a critical determinant in their ultimate defeat. For the individuals who had wielded Thompsons in battle, the weapon held a deeply personal significance. These Marines and soldiers had learned to entrust their lives to a firearm that had never failed them when it mattered most. In the humid Solomon's jungles, on the coral shores of the Central Pacific, and within the volcanic caverns of Iwo Jima, the Thompson had proven itself a steadfast companion during humanity's darkest hours. Sergeant John Basilone, whose name became virtually synonymous with Thompson effectiveness at Guadalcanal, did not live to witness the war's conclusion. He perished on the beaches of Iwo Jima in February 1945, still carrying the weapon that had catapulted him to fame. However, his legacy, and that of countless other Thompson gunners, endured in the tactical doctrines and weapon designs that would shape future conflicts. The Thompson's influence extended beyond its military applications. The weapon's success in World War II contributed to a rehabilitation of its reputation, transforming it from an emblem of lawlessness into an icon of American resolve. Hollywood embraced this metamorphosis, showcasing the Thompson in numerous war films that celebrated American heroism and technological superiority. In the post-war era, as America ascended to the status of a global superpower, the Thompson submachine gun became a potent symbol of the industrial might that had facilitated victory. The weapon represented the triumph of American manufacturing over Axis militarism, a testament to the capacity of democratic societies to outproduce and outfight totalitarian regimes when adequately motivated. Perhaps most importantly, the Thompson service in the Pacific War illuminated the unpredictable nature of military innovation. A weapon conceived for World War I trenches, perfected on Prohibition-era streets, had discovered its true calling in Pacific jungles and coral fortresses. The firearm that Japanese officers had dismissed as a mere toy had become the harbinger of their defeat. The mirth that had greeted the Thompsons' arrival in the Pacific had given way to something far more profound. an acknowledgement that modern warfare would be determined not only by valor and tactical skill, but also by the capacity to generate and deploy superior armaments in overwhelming numbers. The Thompson submachine gun, with its .45 caliber authority and mechanical dependability, had articulated this truth with unequivocal clarity across every major theater of the Pacific. As veterans returned home and the Pacific Islands were rebuilt, the sound of Thompson fire gradually receded into memory, yet its echo would reverberate through military history, serving as a reminder that in warfare, as in life, assumptions can prove perilous, and the weapon you disregard today might be the very one that vanquishes you tomorrow. The Japanese had learned this lesson at a grievous cost. The Americans too had learned it, though their education had been considerably more palatable. The Thompson submachine gun, gangster's weapon, Marine's companion, symbol of industrial warfare, had etched its name into history with bullets that would never be forgotten. Ultimately, the Thompson's most significant triumph was not measured in enemy casualties or battles won, but in the fundamental alteration of American military thinking. The weapon had substantiated the principle that overwhelming firepower, when applied judiciously, could surmount any tactical disadvantage. This profound lesson would profoundly influence American military doctrine for decades to come, shaping everything from the assault rifles of the Vietnam era to contemporary special operations weaponry. The Thompson submachine gun entered the Pacific War as a contentious implement with a criminal past. It emerged as an icon of American victory, a symbol of the innovation that had paved the way for triumph. The .45 caliber voice that had once spoken for Chicago gangsters had found its true purpose as the mechanical herald of American liberation. The gun. History would remember their silence,